Everyone, and welcome to our panel this evening. We're happy to be joined by a couple of key members of the Polkadot ecosystem to what I think is like to discuss something I actually haven't had the opportunity to really like discuss in a live setting in front of the Polkadot community. Is like this really starting to see the first iterations of protocols working together on Polkadot to complete some end user tasks. So happy to be joined by Derek from Moonbeam, Eric Wang from Parity, Betty from Acala, and Eric Chen from Injective. Thanks all for being here. Really excited to kick off and get into a deeper conversation because there's sort of two different collaborations between the different teams here that are all aimed towards delivering some end user product, which is really core to like what the Polkadot value proposition has been, is like empowering this sort of collaboration, composability to happen. But first, I think we'll go around the horn and do some brief introductions. If you all could just give your a little bit of your background and what your project is focused on. We can start with Derek from Moonbeam.
Sure. Hey, I'm Derek, the CEO of PureStake. We're building the project Moonbeam, and Moonbeam is to be a parachain on Polkadot, and it provides an Ethereum-like smart contract developer platform to build on.
Awesome. Thanks, Derek. And next we will hear from Betty from Acala.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Thanks for having us here. It's cool to see all the friends on the same, I guess, panel and have a chat.
Different from Clubhouse. This is Betty. We have video here.
Yeah, I think this is better. So Betty, co-founder of Acala, and Acala is a DeFi hub on Polkadot, and then we're providing stablecoin as well as liquid staking, and we're also a platform, so got EVM compatibility to have dApps to land on Acala and use Polkadot assets and DeFi facilities here. So, and we're all connected together as parachains. So I think the future is going to be multiple chains composable with each other. I think the future is going to be bright. So that's for me.
Thank you. Eric Chen from Injective.
Hey guys, this is Eric Chen from Injective. So Injective is a fully decentralized order book-based derivatives exchange that supports cross-chain DeFi trading and yield generation. We're actually built on top of Cosmos currently, but we've been working on a lot of integrations to make sure that we tap into and connect with the greater Polkadot ecosystem.
Thank you. And then Eric Wang, my colleague at Parity Technologies.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Eric Wang, and I'm the ecosystem growth lead at Parity. And at Parity, we are a development shop that builds various foundational protocols, such as Substrate, which is a software development kit, and Polkadot, which is the network that we're all talking about today.
Awesome. And I am Peter Morick, head of public affairs at Parity Technologies, work with Eric and also closely with a lot of these different teams in the ecosystem to help the adoption and overall growth of the Polkadot ecosystem and Web3 broadly as well. So I think, first of all, I know a lot of the audience here probably has a pretty good understanding of what Polkadot offers, but Eric Wang, if you wouldn't mind giving just a quick refresher for everyone on Polkadot and generally speaking, like what is different about its architecture than say what people are used to on Ethereum.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's a question that we at Parity, I guess, receive quite frequently. So on the part on how it's different from Ethereum, so I would say that Polkadot is more interested in being somewhat of a lower level of abstraction compared to Ethereum. And Ethereum is primarily designed to be more of a smart contract platform for more generalized kind of logic execution. And if you could see Ethereum as quote unquote layer one, then Polkadot could be seen as a little bit like a layer below that. So, and as Ethereum is connected to Polkadot via bridges such as something like the Snowflake bridge, Ethereum would have more of a similar level of abstraction compared to, let's say, a smart contract supporting parachain on Polkadot, such as Acala or Moonbeam. And I would say, therefore, in terms of the product itself, there's actually not too much competition between the two. But if you look at potential kind of business relationships for developers and users who may only have the resources to kind of build or use one of the two platforms, then I guess there's a limited number of developers and end users to kind of choose from. So there may be more of a kind of competitive relationship in that sense. And so if you could, as an example, choose between building a set of smart contracts on Ethereum or a parachain on Polkadot, and although in a sense the use cases of smart contracts and building parachains could be relatively different, these are kind of competitive design decisions one needs to make. On the part of the question on what Polkadot is and what Polkadot tries to solve, Polkadot is a quote unquote scalable heterogeneous sharded blockchain ecosystem.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
Indeed. but essentially what it allows you to do is it's designed in such a way so that it makes it easier for people to build, secure, and connect blockchains. So before something like Substrate, which is the SDK for people to build either independent blockchains or blockchains that connect to Polkadot, I guess before they came along, developers were kind of stuck building on smart contract platforms, which, as I mentioned before, were relatively inflexible on the types of logic and parameters they could kind of manipulate, such as gas price. And building a blockchain, which allows for more powerful, flexible logic, is difficult. And as Substrate allowed you to build blockchains in a more simplified manner, that definitely helped solve many problems that we were facing before. Blockchain can then build on top of blockchains to create dApps, whether it's on a smart contract level or like a deeper level. And
yeah, so
once blockchains are up, then you have the problem of, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go finish up.
Sorry, I'm almost done.
No worries.
So once these blockchains are up, there's I guess the problem of how they can be actually secured against attacks. So for most of these independent blockchains, it costs easily millions of dollars to actually build a strong validator set for, I guess, a traditional blockchain. However, if they're connected to the Polkadot ecosystem as a parachain, for example, all these parachains delegate their security to a common set of validators so that the individual blockchains themselves do actually not have to worry about transaction security. And finally, it's difficult to pull together network effects between these different blockchains if they're not able to kind of natively talk to each other. And Polkadot kind of natively enables things such as XCMP and Spree to allow these blockchains to kind of communicate with each other relatively effectively.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for the rundown. So at its core, I think like this value proposition of providing a security and security and communications layer, this layer 0 for a new generation of layer 1 blockchains is really, really important. So let's hear a bit from Betty and Derek a bit about like how you look at now, rather than trying to deploy say a DeFi primitive or in Derek's case, like the idea of like imagine having the ability to like actually manipulate the opcodes in Ethereum, how that has changed the way as a developer you look at building this new layer 1. Who wants to go first?
Go ahead, Betty. Why don't you go ahead?
Oh, sure. Thanks. Thanks, Derek. Yeah, I mean, speaking from a builder's perspective, at the Acala team, the team behind Acala actually, so we've started building on top of Substrate, so the development toolkit behind Polkadot since 2.5 years ago. So that's a long time ago, and while we're still in the bear market, which was probably the best time to actually build. And I think a few of the other teams here is also a long-term builder. So the space was really empty back then. But we share some similar vision even from the get-go, right? So one is multi-chain, and then we also think one size can't actually fit all. It just doesn't work with the evolution of technology, regardless of the human society that we are in. So basically, we feel that what a Substrate toolkit and also Polkadot empowers is, while trust is kind of like trust is expensive. and bootstrapping trust is also hard, but it kind of alleviating that pain, for the builders like us, right? Because trust is provided as a service from Polkadot to all of us as parachains. But on top of that, it offers us the opportunity to specialize, because I think as technology evolves, specialization is going to trump generalization. And then from that standpoint of view, I think Ethereum started out as a more generalized platform. It probably still is, but you can see there are some financial applications concentrated on Ethereum. It's doing a great job, right? Innovating and composing with all the smart contracts on there. And the network effect and the users accumulating there and developer effect, is pretty astonishing. So it's going to continue to play a very significant role, at least in DeFi, right? However, if we are talking about innovation coming after Ethereum, then I think we shouldn't take comfort as just doing exactly the same thing, but just slightly faster and cheaper, right? But I think that's what Substrate, the framework as well as Polkadot enable us to do, is to become increasingly specialized and also be really good at making the right compromises or optimizations more so for the right use cases or domain that we are in. And then specifically for Acala, we are making optimization specifically for DeFi, for decentralized finance. So, just at a high level, a couple of examples would be, when we look at our risk portfolio, we can do on-chain liquidation automatically. Right, so there's no external servers, keepers required to have multiple parties together to, piece together for a on-chain DeFi operation. So that's going to be a lot more secure and less moving parts. And also we have guaranteed up-to-date Oracle feeds. That's incredibly hard to do, if you are on a very rigid virtual machine platform. So not only, the price fees are going to be cheaper and faster, but also it's going to be safer because those transactions are guaranteed, so that we can empower more, more sophisticated and user-friendly financial offerings. So that's us.
Love it. So there's
to carry on the conversation. Yeah.
There's a base being built there of some more, like, I guess you say, some frameworks for Polkadot native DeFi to grow. Derek, with Moonbeam, the strategy is a little bit different, right? It's more of like a gateway for Ethereum developers or programmers who have experience using that tooling or have a decent code base built up in Solidity to actually be able to deploy on Ethereum fairly quickly in a multi-chain way. So from the perspective of, you have this layer one now that you've built and putting out there in the world, but how do you look at it as like, this is Moonbeam, this is our project, this community can take this project where it wants, but the core goal is, at the end of the day, being the most Ethereum compatible chain on Polkadot. Correct me if I'm wrong, but so how do you say balance that while still giving a space for growth?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I'll kind of want to riff a little bit on what Betty was talking about, and just so going back to the idea of the power of Substrate, right? So I mean, the first thing that really attracted us to Polkadot was Substrate, and I think people tend to maybe gloss over it a little bit. That if you're trying to build a blockchain from scratch without using a framework like this, I mean, you're going to spend 10x the amount of effort, at least, if not more, maybe 20x the amount of effort. And so there's just this dramatic reduction in the engineering effort you have to put in to create a blockchain. That I think that's what really is broadened, created this broad canvas to paint on, right? Whereas Ethereum opened it up to some degree, and you have a bunch of new possibilities relative to Bitcoin and other more rigid systems and more limited systems before that. Substrate really opens up the canvas even further, where there's this large canvas to paint on now, and I think that's really a large part about what is attracting developers, right? Because they have this large canvas to paint on now that they didn't have before. And I think this idea of specialization that also came up, I want to, that's really something that's quite important to us as well, right? And I think that's one of the advantages of Polkadot, that you can use this framework to create these specialized blockchains. And I think the term that Eric used earlier was this heterogeneous, right? Which is a little bit of a it sounds complicated and it's a little bit of a mouthful, but what that means is that you really can have these different kinds of systems being built using Substrate, and it's kind of up to your imagination, kind of what they're going to be. And so, for us, we chose to kind of create this specialized system with the goal of being highly compatible with Ethereum, right? So that was our choice for what our shard was going to be. And obviously, for Acala, they're optimizing for these different use cases. But I think that ability to kind of specialize and optimize using this very powerful toolkit on like a common ground, that's kind of the key power of the whole system. So how we kind of look at it, I mean, I think that this Ethereum approach was very important to us because it kind of gives us a lot of optionality into being compatible with these different developer tool chains and other kinds of services. But we fully expect, I think it's kind of like right now that's like it's a somewhat simplistic thing. Like people are saying, hey, I have this whole application on Ethereum. Let me just take the whole thing, forklift it, and like put the whole thing down like on something like a Moonbeam, say. But what we fully expect over time is for even those applications to start to spread out and kind of start to take advantage of different specialized services that are on these different chains. And so that that doesn't happen overnight because people already kind of architected their applications in a certain way. But as these new options become available, these new specialized services, I fully expect that to happen, right? That you'll kind of have these multi-chain applications even just within Polkadot leveraging these different kinds of services. So
yeah, pretty exciting.
I actually want to add to Derek's point. The last one is because while we are all building different shards, one thing that people haven't seen too much, but I think we show a little bit on the Polka DeFi demo day is all of our shards are composable with each other. So not only our tokens, assets can transfer from Moonbeam to Acala to Moonbeam, and then I think the next exciting stuff is the states can also be transferred. So we can actually compose actual applications. So I'm just like improvising on the fly, is like you could actually probably think about through Moonbeam, there are some Ethereum assets, cross to Moonbeam and then did some trades, right? And then on there, it could probably land over to Acala and then become a collateral asset and then also participate in liquid staking. So all of a sudden, maybe you only hold Ethereum assets, but now you can also earning staking yield through Moonbeam and Acala. But of course, from a user perspective, you wouldn't see that, right? You just have one click. All of a sudden, your ETH is earning staking yield. But behind the scene, there's actually Moonbeam working with Acala and maybe some bridges together to make all of that happen. I think that's where it's actually heading, and we already have working code at the infrastructure level, so I can see it's probably going to happen a lot sooner than we kind of all hope for. So
yeah, that was part of why I'm so excited for this conversation, because we already we're starting to see this start to play out in part with Eric and Injective working with multiple parachains to deliver the end product you want for your end user. So Eric, I know that you're working both with the Moonbeam and the Acala teams. So I'm excited to hear about your Polkadot implementation, as you said, initially or currently primarily deployed on Cosmos, but excited to hear about how you're employing or integrating with Acala and Moonbeam to like deliver that product, and then what sort of interoperability between Polkadot and Cosmos you're looking to enable.
Yeah, so generally we have a fairly strong, almost like a chain agnostic stance. And so ironically, that also means that oftentimes we end up being very native to in the EVM layer, which is where most of the wallets are being supported, which is where most of the custodian, all the existing integrations are being supported. And so even though we're built on top of this Cosmos layer, like in terms of like user facing aspects of it, in terms of how they interact with the protocol, it's they just feel like they're interacting with Ethereum, basically, maybe even like treating it as a scaling solution for Ethereum. So that's what we're really excited about, just in general. It's that we want to have like a standard that most of the users stake with, and in the back end, it's completely chain agnostic. It's going between all the ecosystems out there in the world. Going through Acala's DeFi infrastructure, going through Moonbeam to land into the Polkadot ecosystem. So I think that's what's getting me really excited, because from a user's perspective, they still feel like they're using the same wallet, but in the back end, it's a completely different story. And yeah, like the way Injective is built, it's always, from like a Ethereum user first perspective. We want to make sure that the value and also the kind of like network effect that Ethereum has can be fully transposed onto our chain and eventually dispersed throughout multiple whether it's parachains on Polkadot or Cosmos zones on Cosmos.
Awesome. So, Derek, do you want to talk a bit about what it's been like, maybe not specifically with Injective, but just broadly speaking, working with teams that have an existing Ethereum code base to help them deploy their project on Polkadot, and then just like stepping back broadly, this thing that Eric touched on in terms of like how important EVM has become in the blockchain industry, and why it's generally speaking a one of the standards that's likely here to stay.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I was going to kind of riff on that. Well, I'll answer the first part of your question first, which is, how does it work? How has it been working with existing teams, with existing Ethereum code bases? I mean, that is specifically the use case that we've spent quite a bit of energy trying to optimize for and trying to make as frictionless as possible. We're striving to make that that it's whatever you're deploying to Ethereum, you can deploy to Moonbeam, and there's really minimal changes needed. I think what we've discovered is that there's the core kind of EVM and that feature set, but then there's kind of a bunch of integrations and other tools that people coming from Ethereum expect to have too. So that's where we've been spending, kind of a lot of our energies on those like kind of supporting cast of characters like these tools and integrations. But specifically to this question about standards, I do think that is kind of on the money here. That we're in this kind of multi-chain environment at this point. And it's just not going to work that well if everyone has their own technology implementation, right? So I think the world needs kind of standard ways for these chains to interact with each other. And I think to start with, I think Polkadot itself is offering like a very powerful solution to this, where using things like XCMP and being parachains on Polkadot, you get this very high bandwidth and secure and rich way to interact with other between parachains, like Betty was describing before. But I would say that not everyone in the world is not going to be like a Polkadot parachain. And so when I start looking outside of kind of just the Polkadot ecosystem, then it is like the Ethereum style technology stack and EVM. For better or for worse, that kind of is like the tech stack that is the standard, basically, right? And then so I think when I look at integrations that we've done with folks that are outside of the Polkadot ecosystem, is generally, that's kind of the standard approach that most people are kind of converging to. And I think the world just needs standards, right? So when it comes to things like even accounts, like the address formats, the keys, the other things, I mean, that's all friction if those are all different things. So I think as Eric was mentioning, I think that there's power in kind of sticking in kind of coalescing around a few standards, right, that are going to help make people interoperable.
Generally agreed. Betty, so you were, or are, I guess, the first Polkadot native asset that Injective is going to incorporate. Can you talk a bit about sort of what that means for both Acala and Injective, and anything any insights you have on being up on the Rococo testnet and being some of the first projects to start to test out interoperability between parachains?
Yeah, sure. I think first of all, it's like courtesy to the Injective team, right? I think they are certainly one of the more forward-looking teams in the crypto space that kind of like taking concrete steps towards the multi-chain vision that we all share here, right? And then between Injective and Acala, I think first of all is certainly bridges will need to be built there for the assets to go across chain. And then I think Derek alluded to this standards for messaging passing across different blockchains, right? So I think one of the inventions out of many from Gavin and Parity is this XCM, so cross messaging passing standard. That is at a level that is where it's not only going to be useful within the Polkadot ecosystem or Kusama ecosystem per se, like between the parachains or the relay chains. It's even at abstracted at a level that it's able to be used cross consensus. So I think that maybe very few people actually realize it's actually gone, the vision actually gone that far. The standards are defined at that level of I guess, composability. And of course, it's up to the builders like ourselves, like sitting here in the room, to go a level below that to actually implement some of those messages for our fungible tokens to start with, and maybe non-fungible tokens later on. So that not only between the parachains that we can easily, compose with each other, but also between chains that have different consensus systems, right? Cosmos and parachains here. So I think I just want to put it out there that, we're all on this journey together. So there's a lot more work that we can, I guess, all share and carry forward, as a bigger team, I guess, not just within Polkadot, but actually across multiple, I guess, consensus layers together. And then beyond that, though, with Injective, I think it's pretty cool that the product that they're building, I've actually used their app myself, and it's quite a sleek design at the front end, and I think the users gonna love it. Like if they're all like me, very simple user interface. And then from there, the Acala dollar can be crossed to the Injective platform, right? And then Acala dollar is like a native Polkadot, sort of derived assets, if you like. And then from there, I think can power a lot more different type of derivative trading products, maybe a lot more based around the Polkadot asset ecosystem, right? And also, the Acala dollar is actually backed by a DOT, and also the liquid DOT, and also some other assets like BTC as well. So it's going to make, I guess, economics a bit more interesting when that goes on to Injective's platform as well. So and then I think on top of that, I guess it is also adding a new asset class. I guess there's quite a bit of thoughts around risk, and also how you profile the leverage levels and things like that. So I think that would be the interesting point. I think next, when we carry out a bit more of this forward towards going live with those product sets. So yeah, so that's my 10 cents there.
10 cents, love it. So we've gotten quite deep into what folks are building, some of the challenges or benefits of working with a framework like Substrate. Like, obviously, building and launching your own shard, your own layer one, is no light lift. But we've done quite a lot of work at Parity Technologies to make it possible. So as part of that is Substrate, the framework, but without developer help and support and education, it is still quite a steep barrier to learn how to build in a brand new framework like Substrate, which happens to be written in a language called Rust, which there aren't huge amounts of developers for. It's a very cutting edge, fairly newer language for developers to code in. So Eric, maybe you could give us a little bit of detail on the Substrate Builders program and what we've been doing at Parity Technologies to support teams like Moonbeam and Acala who are building this next generation layer ones, and then how that sort of support helps trickle down to an integration like Injective across both chains.
Gotcha. That's a great question. So essentially for the Builders program, back in about late 2019, we saw that builders in the Substrate and Polkadot ecosystems were primarily those who were building blockchains directly rather than that because of the difficulties of learning Rust and kind of building a blockchain in the first place. There was not that much kind of knowledge on actually how to build these blockchains. And these were some of the reasons for the Builders program to exist in the first place. Parity also wanted to kind of learn about and attract, I guess, some of the, best projects within the ecosystem to allow them to have the resources to also attract other teams in return. And the Builders program was essentially initially started to provide resources to make sure that Substrate builders are successful in deploying blockchains, and in return can essentially set a high caliber example for a blockchain for the rest of the ecosystem to be inspired by. And so fast forward to today, which is almost a year and a half later, we have over 40 teams now in the Builders program, which is growing pretty rapidly. And it's definitely taken some projects successfully to new heights and has connected these projects with one another and with resources that Parity has deployed. And the Builders program also kind of has become somewhat of a quote unquote premier program for the Polkadot ecosystem, and has also successfully attracted more teams to join the ecosystem because of the amount of perceived support that these teams can receive. So within the program, it has quite a few initiatives. And within the past year and a half, it evolved to not only support blockchain builders, but now also dApp builders, which we consider those who are essentially building on top of potential parachains and parathreads, and infrastructure builders, which are things such as tooling, block explorers, that kind of stuff. And the program provides technical support, community funding opportunities, launch support, BD support, and strategy and feedback. So quite a variety of support structures out there. And it's quite active these days. We receive quite a few applications. And after you get into the program, teams are continuously expected to make progress. And we have milestone check-ins, which kind of, I guess, drive the team to, move forward. And it helps validate that these teams are progressing. So for Injective, for example, if they wanted to join the Builders program, they would probably apply for something like the dApp, the application track for those who are building on top of platforms, blockchains. And then they would probably receive support essentially from another parachain potentially to actually, launch their platform within the Polkadot ecosystem.
Amazing. So Eric Chen, in terms of like, just from the perspective of an end user application, how have you, obviously being already sort of on more than one protocol at once, how do you approach like sort of, I want to say, future proofing your application to ensure that it's ready for whatever multi-chain future we are going to see? How do you think about sort of where you allocate resources to build? And does that mean sort of like, do you look towards a future where you could potentially deploy as a parachain on Polkadot?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, like, first of all, at the end of the day, we are an application specific chain. So any type of upgrade, any type of governance change, it'll happen on chain. And obviously, as we're all unifying towards the same goal, as Injective, which is to build out like an exchange ecosystem. Now, where would that bring us in 3 to 5 years? We're not exactly sure, but we know that that's a purpose. We're not distracted like a lot of the generalized layer ones. So generally, I would say that this is our strategy for future proofing. It's to ensure that as kind of like a quasi layer one chain that's I would say also united behind like a common purpose. Your incentives are almost always aligned. So if there's ever like an integration that needs to be done, the community will rally behind it and make the proper upgrade. Whether that might be like completely moving to Polkadot, or like staying on Cosmos, or connecting to a new layer one. So I think that's really the beauty of like how we're set up. And then another thing is that like right now, like as an application level layer, as a dApp, EVM has been almost synonymous with DeFi itself. So that's why like the way we set it up on day one is that, number one, we are EVM compatible, and we have an internal bridge that allows for the internal transfer between the Cosmos layer and the EVM layer. So essentially, EVM transaction has like the superiority over the Cosmos transaction. And another thing is that we've made it extremely composable for the derivative positions. We can export and tokenize these derivative positions. And actually, like this is something that we kind of like leave like a creek for the window, and like let everyone to explore, what's possible behind it. So I would say, generally we try to keep the protocol as open as possible. And this way, we can move very nimble, very fast for whatever's rising, whatever's growing really quickly, and work with them and just create like a better network effect for everyone.
Awesome. Yeah, it's exciting to see more applications like yourself explore what this multi-chain future really looks like, because we can't know for sure, but we know it is going to be multi-chain. So it's exciting to see prominent projects really make that commitment and start to deploy branches, as the Acala team started to refer to its own deployment, and then like deployments of other projects on Acala as branches of whatever the main application is, which I kind of really like that sort of framing of what this really means, and an easy way for people to understand what multi-chain means. It's like, imagine if Chase Bank were actually only in Manhattan, it wouldn't be very big of a bank. So we had about 20 minutes left. I don't think that we're set up to take questions from the audience, so I thought we could talk just broadly about other stuff that's been going on recently in the ecosystem. So I think maybe starting with Bete, we can talk maybe about the proposal you submitted to Compound's community in the last week or so. For those of you in the audience that don't know, Compound's cash chain is being built on Substrate, and they've reference this similar, the branch idea, they call them starports, to sort of integrate Compound or connect Compound chain to different chains, different ecosystems, different communities. So tell me about the proposal you submitted.
Yeah, so this has been long coming, because we kind of working behind the scene on the technical stuff for quite a while, investigating how this is possible. But I think I guess from a higher level, again, it goes back to this multi-chain vision. I think Compound is yet again another those teams that have this forward-thinking sort of vision that the future is going to be multi-chain, right? Because the Compound chain or Compound gateway that they propose now have a test net is basically a multi-chain money market, right? So they've already kind of like foreseeing those demand or adoption is coming for users going to want to use assets from various different blockchains, and now they are kind of elevating themselves up one level to actually providing a money market service, which is what they specialize in and very good at, or that are able to serve multiple different blockchains. So I think from that regard, we are kind of like on the same boat and same journey. And at the same time, we also want to help both the Compound community as well as the Polkadot community to kind of share more assets with each other, as well as the user base, and continue to grow that community together. So I'll give you maybe a couple of examples. So what we, in that proposal, what we envision to do is to build a start port on Acala, so which is basically a gateway, if you like, between Polkadot and also the Compound chain. And then what that allows us to do is to actually be able to upload, using their terminology, but it's basically able to provide dot based assets to the Compound as new collaterals, but also be able to bring the Compound assets as well as the Compound service into the wider Polkadot ecosystem. So I think as like many other stuff that we've done in the space, we kind of the first to kind of attempt this, and also the first to try to tackle some of the technical difficulties, even though Compound chain is built on Substrate, so naturally it should be a given for us, but there are still quite a number of, I guess, technical challenges we have to go through. But our vision is actually, firstly, it's going to deploy on Acala, but then we're going to build it at a pallet level, so that will be available to all the parachains to actually install, and then be able to set up a start port, and then kind of like having the assets flow freely across Compound and any of the parachains. But of course, the assets doesn't have to flow just vertically. It can also go cross-chain, right? So when a Compound cash landed on Acala, it can also go cross-chain to Moonbeam and others for any of the potential farming or other activities that's available within the Polkadot ecosystem, right? So that kind of opens up, I guess, Compound's user into a bigger world, I guess, for a lot more different use cases and activities. But also at the same time, we kind of bring in Compound's money market services to the Polkadot users, I guess, in that regard. So it's kind of like a win-win-win situation in that regard. And that's why we, quite happily taking extra effort and then making that possible, I guess, for the wider community. So yeah, so that's the story behind it.
Exciting stuff. Looking forward to seeing how the compound community responds. Derek, there was some news recently about another sort of DeFi blue chip project integrating with Moonbeam Balancer. I don't know if you want to chat a little bit about your work with that team.
Yeah. So if I you can paint a picture that there are we kind of started off approaching a lot of different kinds of Ethereum projects with this idea of, I was describing before, of, hey, like we can make it easy for you to have a Polkadot deployment. But it's definitely the case that I think we've seen a lot of interest from the DeFi sector. Balancer is like one of the examples there, although there are other examples. Sushi is one of the other partners that we work with fairly closely. I think that we're definitely excited in trying to like build bootstrap kind of a DeFi ecosystem like on Moonbeam. So DEXs play obviously a big role in that, but there are other components that are needed. So things like we're spending a lot of our time these days on lending and borrowing protocols and stable coins. I mean, I think when you start to really dig into this and you realize you're trying to bootstrap these things, you realize that it's all kind of interconnected, right? So like you can't kind of have the one thing without some of these other pieces like also being there. That's definitely where we're spending quite a bit of our time these days. And I think that, I mean, back to kind of some of the points were made before, I think that a lot of these teams, like they are similarly becoming or are already open-minded to multi-chain deployments. Right. So I think that obviously part of that is just the context of Ethereum and some of what the gas prices are and these kinds of things. I mean, that's what I call the push. But like the pull is that they're interested in some in things like Polkadot, right, and kind of getting to this new ecosystem where there's a lot of like assets being created, where there's a lot of activity, developer activity. So we're pretty encouraged by the reception that we're finding as we're approaching a lot of these in some cases teams that have been building on Ethereum for a long time, basically, right?
Awesome. Eric Chen, you knew I was going to ask. You bought and you burnt a Banksy. You got to tell the story for everyone here.
Yeah. So that's actually a really crazy story. Essentially what happened was basically there were like a couple of projects, a lot of friends that are involved in this. I kind of like chipped in as well, but I definitely wasn't a guy, really driving this through. So it was really interesting to see how everything played out. I think the reason why like a lot of people thought that we were behind it was because one of our team member was talking to media people, and then talking about the event. I think, and basically the funniest thing was the journalist kind of assumed that he works at Injective, so he was it was a company that did it, but it's actually not. Bernd Banksy is a really good friend of ours, and he's basically been carrying on this idea, and we really support it. It's really crazy, and we always like crazy ideas. So it's been super, super exciting.
For me, it's almost like I get NFTs generally speaking. I understand why they're exciting for art and broadly. I think maybe some of the purely digital NFTs are less exciting than a tie back to like physical art I can put on my wall, or something like a story like that where you can tell. And I think, Banksy, if we remember the piece of art that he shredded, appreciates, and I don't speak for him or her, but I would, based on what we've seen, appreciates that, making the art something beyond just the image, and part of it being the experience, whether it pops up or disappears or gets shredded or burnt. And that for me actually makes the digital representation of that event more interesting for me to own than say, NBA Top Shot's exciting and amazing, but owning a clip of a dunk is less exciting to me than owning, you know, the official sort of digital representation of something that's more like an art event, or actually the physical piece of art, which I find pretty interesting. Anyone got, I guess we got about 10 minutes here. So I wanted to open it up for more of a free, open conversation about just sort of what's been happening in the industry more broadly. And I think NFTs are an interesting one to talk about, like what's hype and what's not. If anyone has thoughts on the Beeple sale today, I'm interested to hear, with or without Justin Sun commentary.
Oh, right. The $69 million auction, right?
Yeah.
Crazy. I don't think he actually bought it though. I think it was
no.
Yeah, someone else outbid him, and I think Justin Sun made like a bid for like 60 million, and final bid was 69 actually.
It was circulating around earlier. I haven't confirmed yet, but I saw some headlines that it was him that bought it, and I chuckled a little bit.
Yeah, no, it turns out it wasn't. So it's pretty interesting.
Interesting. So this also, the NFT thing makes me think about a topic we haven't actually talked about this evening, and might actually be a good little sub topic to cover in the last 10 minutes, which is Kusama Network, which is a canary network for Polkadot. For those of you that aren't aware, we launched it about a year before we launched Polkadot as a real world test bed for the Polkadot technology before it was audited, and just so that we could really understand how it actually works in real economic circumstances. And both Derek and Betty are launching parachains on Kusama in addition to on Polkadot. It brings me though to the topic of Kusama. This is where we see a lot of the sort of NFT innovation and general focus on the artistic community, the innovators, the adventurers happening broadly in the Polkadot ecosystem. So Derek, starting with you, I'd say, how do you look at Moonriver, your Kusama implementation, differently in this sort of Kusama iterative, innovative, artistic light? Art on the blockchain.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I'd say that we certainly kind of follow from the same principles, I think, that you described that led Parity to, create Kusama in the first place. I mean, we are believers in the idea that, you can achieve like higher velocity and better quality, like by having something like that, right? And I think there was just very practical, examples I was given, at the time Kusama came out, that, there's certain features you just can't test, basically, right? I mean, so things like governance features, like no one cares like what happens on the chain if there's like no value at stake. For some of the the validator behavior and other things that just like it's just it's not like a real environment. So we buy that, and I think we see it as a big part of the competitive advantage that that Polkadot has, is that you have this kind of environment. It's almost like old school when you had like different environments for your application. You have the same idea where you can kind of achieve higher velocity and higher quality. Now, I think, it's always the case that when you create something, sometimes it gets used in ways that, weren't intended. So, that's definitely seems like the case here, where certain use cases of, they said, hey, no, that's my final destination. And certain use cases have migrated there. So, I mean, I do see the same, the same thing potentially playing out on, our Moonriver deployment, where, I mean, obviously to start, it's going to be, for both, Acala and Moonbeam, we're only going to have those deployments first before the Polkadot deployments come. But over time, it may be the case that use cases that don't necessarily require the full economic security that the Polkadot deployments can provide, it may just be like quite good to deploy as your final destination onto the Kusama-based deployment. And I think that certainly for some like NFT and kind of these use cases, I mean, do those need, or maybe the $69 million like NFT does, but for many of them, like they do not require like the full economic security. So that could make sense as like a use case. I mean, in particular, I'll also say when we speak a lot of gaming, game use cases, there's like a need for on-chain data, but the need for like heavy duty economic security is like not there. So those are probably also likely candidates to permanently deploy to something like Moonriver or Acala's deployment to Kusama.
Betty, your Kusama deployment of the Acala technology is called Karura. Tell me more.
Yeah, I would actually go as far as for Kusama is like if you think Bitcoin is a miracle, right? Because it's literally some cyberpunk launches some server, and now look at where it's at, right? The top 500 Fortune 500 companies are putting that in their balance sheet. I go as far as saying Kusama is another miracle, um, because I mean seriously, that was uh, I think initially the motivation behind Kusama was literally the technical perspective that we need something, some network with value, that we just need to test stuff, right? Test governance, test the economic parameters, test consensus. Um, and then now you look at Kusama, of course, if you judge it by its market value, it's gone crazy, right? It's like 3 point something billion dollars now. But beyond that, there's a life behind Kusama, I realized. There's a whole community that is completely, probably different, very different now, deviating more and more from the Polkadot community. So there's life behind this network and community. And also, I think the builders are also start to deviate a little bit as well. As Derek pointed out, some folks are probably only gonna land on Kusama without thinking more of Polkadot. So how I see it, from a different perspective is like, maybe Polkadot is more like blue chip, right? So if you need bank grade security, there's a higher barrier of entry, but then that's probably worthwhile to launch on Polkadot eventually. But maybe you can look at Kusama more like maybe the entrepreneurial board of the stock market, that you can launch your more risk taking or fast iteration applications or your venture on Kusama that way. So I think there's different. I think Kusama also has a different vibe, right? I think there's a lot more artistic and creativity going on there. I think mostly because the community behind it is where the bad blood or the interesting blood there to actually making this thing so lively today. And then from Acala's perspective, we are DeFi infrastructure. So for us, it's like we will have to serve both communities because the DeFi switch that we offer. So our chain on Kusama is called Karura. So it's literally the firing bird. I think it's by accident that we kind of also ended up as a bird, but it's a goddess from Japan, Buddhism sort of goddess there. And anyway, so and then for the Karura network, it will offer a KSM focused DeFi suite. Right. So you need liquid staking for KSM so that you can use KSM for other DeFi activities. And then also a stable coin around based collateralized by KSM and things like that. Right. So that full DeFi infrastructure will have to be there to actually power the Kusama community. So we'll be trying to be the first amongst the first chains to be on there so that we can offer a wide variety of products and services for the KSM folks there to actually help bootstrap the ecosystem. And then at the same time, I also know that the Kusama is going to have a bridge between Kusama and Polkadot. Even though we don't get that from day one, but having that in the roadmap in our perspective is going to be very interesting because now you're having two initially parallel universe. Now you can actually kind of do trades and join together. So there's a lot more interesting use case there. So I see some of the folks will probably launch on Kusama, and then later on maybe they don't think they want to upgrade onto Polkadot, and then they kind of stop operation on Kusama and then just like carry on their business on Polkadot and mainly use Kusama as a test bed. And I also see some of the more infrastructure level providers like ourselves, like Acala and Karura, will probably perpetuating, operating on the both chains and serve both communities. Yeah, so I actually can't wait, like for Kusama to launch because that's another wild world and yeah, I think from there it's like Polkadot is gonna go even wilder. But let's launch Kusama first.
Yeah, soon, as they say. It's been really, really, really rewarding and inspiring to see the evolution of like what a product life cycle on Polkadot can look like, whether you're a parachain or an app. Since like 3 years ago, where everyone was like, oh, Polkadot, you build on it, you're a parachain or you're nothing, to now there's like a really wide set of options for projects who want to deploy on this technology, and a really sort of elegant upgrade path to potentially go from building something that's more on the application layer, like Injective is doing now on Moonbeam, but having a very clear path if they wanted to become a parachain at the end of the day. So we only have about a minute left here, but Eric, weighing on the substrate builder side, like how, when you're talking to teams about like what this product lifestyle upgrade path could look like how do they receive that? It's fairly a newer sort of concept for the Polkadot ecosystem broadly, is like it's not just be a parachain or not. How do you approach that conversation with new teams that you talk to or are interested in entering the ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think it depends on a lot on, for example, how much resources a team has, or how deeply they initially want to commit to the Polkadot ecosystem at the beginning. So, I mean, as I mentioned before we kind of only consider substrate development as basically people who are looking to build parachains. But then now, not only are there kind of the options to build parachains, there's also the options to kind of build a blockchain but connect it as a parathread. And for example, between a parachain and a parathread, I mean, it's largely on, for example, how much money you think that you could secure for a certain amount of time to basically fund a crowd loan. And also there's kind of people that now we figure out wants to kind of build an application, whether it's basically as a set of runtime modules or as a set of smart contracts. And then there's various considerations that go there as well. So depending on exactly what that team is looking for, how much resources they have, how much financial resources they're able to raise, then we're able to kind of give certain recommendations or point them to a certain way to kind of build in the ecosystem. But the nice thing about kind of having so many options is that there's a little bit of this flavor for pretty much anyone who's looking to kind of take part in Polkadot and Kusama.
Fantastic. A flavor for everyone. The Baskin Robbins of blockchains. Only the Americans will get that. Thank you all for joining us today, Derek, Betty, Eric, and Eric. I think it's been a really interesting conversation, and I'm excited to see how we're all able to continue working together to deliver this Web3 vision that I think we all share.
Thanks.
Thanks so much, guys.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.